Welcome back to NoSo Countdown, counting down the greatest WrestleMania performers in history. My name is Chad Campbell. I am pleased on this edition of NoSo Countdown to be discussing number 13, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, with Charles from Wrestling Playlists. How are you doing today, Charles?
I'm doing great. How are you, Chad?
I'm doing great. Have you ever discussed Ric Flair before?
I was going to say, I don't know if any two people on the planet have talked about Ric Flair more than the two people that are doing this right now.
Yeah, I could have got Parv on to do the big laugh for the Flair WrestleMania review, but besides that, pretty synonymous, I would say yourself with Ric Flair, but him with WrestleMania, I think, is a little bit of a unique circumstance where he had that one match kind of in his prime, and that was right at the tail end, 1992, and then kind of came back on his victory lap tour or whatever when he was with the WWE in the 2000s after WCW closed.
Yeah.
So just in general, what's your kind of first inclination when you think about Ric Flair and WrestleMania?
I don't really see it as his event so much in terms of something where he's, a big part of the tradition or anything like that. I think for me, like, especially when it comes on early on, it kind of feels like, you know how it is if someone like who's been acting forever and has been great forever, like one year they get an Oscar nomination and it's for something that it's really like secretly kind of a lifetime achievement thing, even though it's not billed that way. And I would say that's kind of how Flair is at WrestleMania 8. Like at least we got something that was fairly close to his peak years and against an opponent that people had wanted to see him against for a long time.
Yeah, I think comparing the WrestleMania 8 match to like The Departed from Martin Scorsese's a good comp. Um I don't know many people that would think like that's Martin Scorsese's best movie, but really when you think about like the amount of eyeballs that have been on Ric Flair in his career, like the WrestleMania 8 match with Randy Savage at this point in time, with how WWF has kind of monopolized everything in the past 30 years, um 30 plus years, you can see that that's maybe one of his most watched matches, just as far as like eyeballs on it. It's possible, which is kind of interesting to think about like that compared to I think that's a unique match in that I'm a little higher on it than you. But I definitely do see it as it's certainly like a spectacle match, and it's one that kind of, when you think a little bit too hard about the psychology, it can lose a little bit. As far as just the whole angle itself, like what was perfect and Flair's end game, basically promising to show Miss Elizabeth naked on the jumbotron or whatever, and obviously they didn't have that. So was it just like mind games, or it's a little bit shaky in how it goes on, and then you have the kind of, I guess, infamous blade job that Flair does and gets in trouble for in that match. So I think it has some staples of like the classic touring heel champion Flair that you saw in 84, 85, kind of throughout as he was making his rounds. Savage gave a little bit of a Kerry Von Erich at different points. And then the finish, I think, is unique, and it also has a very good kind of infamous announcing call with Bobby the Brain Heenan on the commentary. He's so, he's Flair's advisor or whatever, so he's so invested and such a cheerleader for Flair throughout that match that kind of carries it in his outrage. I do love the promo afterwards where somebody, I don't know if it's Perfect or Bobby or who, but hits kind of the phone booth they had on the set where their backstage segment, and they're so outraged that Savage pulls the tights and cheated, of course, as they've been cheating throughout the whole match. But yeah, you can look at our sheet here on the screen. It's definitely a 4+ star match. I mean, Meltzer gave it 4 1/4 in 1992, which I think is a pretty interesting rating, I would say, for him at that time. He wasn't giving a lot of WWF matches 4+ stars in this time frame. So I would say that's a pretty big rating. And I know Ryan and Justin are doing the kind of YouTube Shorts countdown of every WrestleMania match, and this one fared very well. I think it was in the top 30. I want to say in WrestleMania history. So,
well, I mean, I think like, I mean, you mentioned that you were higher on it than me, but I've become a lot less of a hard ass, I guess, in my old age. I think you have to set aside, and this is something I used to not be so good at doing. You have to set aside that they're not going to do an NWA style match, and you
yeah.
can't punish them for not doing an NWA style match. They're not in the NWA, they're at WrestleMania. And in the past, I really struggled with that whole idea of looking at matches like that. Like, no, they should just do the best possible match no matter where they are. And I don't think that's necessarily the right way to approach it here. This is WWF Ric Flair. I mean, Mr. Perfect is a huge part of the match. I think he interferes. Honestly, the only thing that takes the match down for me is that I think he interferes to a point that it's like, because they can't pay it off. You know, he can't get, because of the Lloyds of London thing, he can't get his comeuppance. He can't get anything in return. So that's my only thing. It's just that he interferes. So it's like when he like literally drags Savage however many feet away from the ring. You know the spot I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Throws him like
Yeah.
off the little platform, right? Yeah.
Now, if Savage had thrown a punch at him and he took this huge bump, it would have all been worth it. But that never happened. And that's really the only thing that I would take away from the match, I think, at this point.
Yeah, even with the post match, after Flair kisses Miss Elizabeth and she slaps him, like Flair takes a bump from her, and then Savage goes that. So Flair is definitely doing the heavy lifting as far as the bumping is concerned. But then, like I say, we have a 10-year gap. So Flair, as everybody knows, goes back to WCW till it dies. Then comes back to WWE at this point, and he faces The Undertaker at WrestleMania 18 in an interesting match. I need to look. I know Flair had the Vince match at the Royal Rumble, but I'm not sure if he wrestled any other matches between then and this WrestleMania match. If he did, I don't. Yeah, I'm not familiar. So this.
Nope.
He was pretty sporadic. I mean, this would have been his second match in essentially a year at this point. And I think this is an interesting match too, because this is kind of the first time. It wasn't a pivotal point, but at the end of this match is when Undertaker does the 10 fingers. So it in some ways kind of starts the streak where it's known, like, okay, he's undefeated at WrestleMania. It certainly becomes more prominent afterwards, but this is kind of the beginning of that. You have the Arn Anderson spot, which I think is the most famous spot within this match, the spine buster, a pretty great near fall, I would say. And then I think this was kind of a pretty important match for The Undertaker, actually, too, as somebody that's went through way too many 2000 and 2001 matches. The Undertaker was really struggling once he came back at Judgment Day 2000 in ring. The American Badass character was different and interesting. I guess it was kind of a product of the time that worked. But in ring, it was a rough go, and I would say the main qualms I had with him in ring was certainly that he ate up a lot of the younger talent. Kurt Angle is so. I mean, it was just awful, really, how he handled the Kurt Angle feud.
I think when he has the zombie act, he can get away with not selling because that's part of what makes it work. But when you're trying to be human, you have to feel pain. And that's, to me, why I didn't really get into that stuff at all. And like you said, I mean, it was pretty much like most of his matches, he was on offense for like 80% of the match.
Yeah.
With Flair, I think it works because Flair is, 50. I guess he would have been 53 at this point in time. So Flair's older. So it's more sympathetic to watch him take a beating. And Flair, like, even at this stage, I mean, he obviously wasn't the same Ric Flair that he would have been 10 years earlier. but he still had that icon status, and he's someone that like people would rally behind if they saw him getting beat up, and he was
Right.
getting beat up here. So it works in that sense.
Yeah.
It's not a match that I like have strong attachment to or anything like that, but I think it was definitely great on the card. It's interesting that they did the Horseman spot in Toronto because I don't think of Toronto was really much of a WCW NWA market.
No.
Yeah, I mean it's funny though because it's a little forgotten history, but like 20 years before, before WWF went national or went to Toronto or anything, like Ric Flair was the biggest star in Toronto. So there is history there, but it would have even predated the Horsemen. But anyway, yeah, I mean it's a fun match, good spot on the card.
Yeah, that kind of sums me up. I mean, I'm probably in the 3.5, 3 3/4, that type of range. So it's a very fun match. I think it was a good match to watch. I mean, going in, it's possible it could have been a disaster. I would say with Undertaker's output. So I do think it overachieved in that way. And then he ends up having a very good 2002 in-ring year, actually, with the Jeff Hardy match, and then of course the Brock series in the fall. So it's kind of the kickoff to his good year in ring. Then I think we can lump these next two. I mean the Money in the Bank 22. I don't know if you have any thought. I mean Flair's just kind of a body in that one.
Well, he takes that superplex. That's the main thing I remember is him taking that superplex from up high on the ladder, which was a crazy spot. But what I loved about it, I remember, is that he sold it. Like it wasn't just like he was laid out. He's actually selling it like you would sell a suplex from that height, which I thought was great. But that's really the only thing that I remember about that match, really all that strongly, though.
Yeah, I mean that. Honestly, a lot of the Money in the Banks at WrestleMania from 22 to 26 run together pretty easily for me. I think the first one kind of has uniqueness and some kind of versatility, and Shelton Benjamin's performance kind of elevates it. But the other ones since then, I mean, they're kind of inoffensive, but I can't distinguish too much between them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the wrong person to comment because my thought is just like you throw a bunch of people in a ladder match, and it's just kind of the same match every time.
Yeah,
few differences around the margins, I guess.
Yeah, we're kind of the two wrong people to be champion most ladder matches. The 20 match I think is a little bit interesting because you have the great heat from the Madison Square Garden crowd when Flair and The Rock are in the ring together. It's just uniqueness. It's kind of interesting that at that point in time, like Flair had moved more into like the manager role or whatever for Evolution. And to see him in the ring and be like, oh, wait a minute, he's kind of has more heat than Randy Orton and Batista in this match was a little alarming, probably, but it was fun to watch. I guess it's a very fun.
Yeah. It's like they just decided, hey, there's this serious feel because really the Foley Orton stuff was built as a really serious personal feud,
right?
And then they just decide in the match, well, what the heck? It's Ric Flair and the Rock at MSG. We're gonna have fun, and they just throw it all completely out.
yeah. They definitely save the serious kind of climax for Orton and Foley for the next month of Backlash, and just had a fun little multi match to build out that card there. So we can finish with WrestleMania 24. I think definitely probably should have been Ric Flair's last match. For sure. I think you can make an argument, honestly, that Starrcade 1993 should have been Ric Flair's last match. But this is probably the last match you can make the argument definitely should have been his last match. I think anything after that, for sure, it was just all right. Enough's enough. So it's the career-threatening match versus Shawn Michaels. Now I mentioned it with the WrestleMania 8 match, but honestly, this might be the most watched match in Ric Flair's career. All things considered, I'd put it up there. Very infamous match. I'm sorry, I loved you. The super kick. A lot of melodrama here. A lot of emotions. I'll say this is, and I still say this. I went to the Sting retirement match at Revolution, and a big part of the reason I made that trip kind of on a whim when my schedule opened up that morning that I could go, was the fact that I missed this match. This match was in Orlando, which is about 7 hours from where I live. I was in college at the time, didn't have, any huge attach. I could have made this trip, and it was one that I kind of regretted that, at that point in time, I just decided not to go to the show and to see the match live. I don't know. As far as a match, it's not one that, I mean, I certainly don't think it's one of Flair's greatest matches because he is someone that has such a wide resume of what I think is great matches. But the emotional beats, I always say, like, if you're going to do a lot of melodrama and emotional beats, if there's a place for them, this type of stage I think is where you can do that. Where, I mean, it's not going to get bigger than your retirement in WrestleMania. You have your family there, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're going to go for melodrama, which again is not my preferred wrestling kind of match template, this is the spot for it. Compared to like maybe an NXT Super Show, or some of the other times where you see that, and it feels very force fed into the viewer. So I do like this match. I have liked it on subsequent viewings. And in a lot of ways, I don't think the emotional impact to me hasn't necessarily been that lessened with Flair coming back, or wrestling a handful of matches before, because really by this time I think the charade of Flair is like it was an interesting your journey that you have as a wrestling fan when you've been like in the internet wrestling community for so long. You get entrenched in it, and by this point in 2008, like the charade was off. Like the mask of Flair is this perfect gentleman was definitely gone. Like you knew about the plane ride from hell. You knew about like the Ring of Honor money dispute and kind of just sort of that shady stuff, and that was even beyond, like, I mean, the Mick Foley book, and there was a lot of kind of chinks in the armor that were starting to crack the facade of Flair as like the ultimate professional, this great upstanding guy. For that reason, like, I don't think that, it's not like, oh well, he really went back on his word. I didn't know if I took him at his word at this moment in time anyway. Seriously, I just figured if he did come back and wrestle again, it'd be what it was, which was an insignificant kind of shell of like a retirement match. So this really is kind of what should have been his last match, really.
I will say at the time, I didn't know if it would be his last match for sure or not, but I absolutely believed that WWE would not book him again. I did believe that.
Yeah.
So it was going to be, I mean, because you're not thinking about TNA or anything like that at that point. It was
Right.
going to be his last match of note on a big stage.
Yes.
So I did buy it in that sense. And I think also with the retirement match, it's kind of, in some ways, some people would even argue that it adds to the viewing experience, even if it's not as good of a match. I mean, we've seen like Muto and other people do retirement matches where in their last match, you can tell they are kind of not what they used to be. And there's things like Flair doing the bridge up where he can't do it anymore. And some people would say that kind of adds to the match because it just makes clear that it's time. I don't know. I guess that just depends on your take on what you get out of it.
Yeah, this one I would put this one. This one's an interesting kind of median of what you think of contemporarily and what was retirement matches, because I certainly don't think his performance was successful as we saw with Sting recently. But yeah, I mean, he's not a shell like Muto is, and even compared to like Tenryu in the match versus Okada, I would say Flair had more of his kind of, his greatest hits or whatever, could still kind of lay it in or whatnot. That was the main thing with Tenryu, just like his Tenryu was so known for his physicality that it was jarring that, he was in the match where he was clearly being protected, which is for the best, but from a psychological standpoint, you lose a little bit there.
Yeah.
but yeah, so that is Ric Flair's WrestleMania resume in a nutshell. As you can see with the average ratings, he had from Dave Meltzer, Canton, and Ryan Gray here. The last three matches we talked about at WrestleMania 20, WrestleMania 22, WrestleMania 24 all had an average 3.92. The Macho Man match has an average of 4.42, and then the Undertaker match is a 3.42. So overall, of his 5 matches, he has a average of 3.92, which is the highest of any performer that has kind of our minimum threshold here of the 5 matches, which again is interesting. I mean, I do think he's an interesting case. I mean, it's Ric Flair, not going to be Mr. WrestleMania, but ended up having 5 successful matches, and honestly, he's one that, as you start going down the list of all the performers, all the greatest performers in WrestleMania history, there's very few that don't have any stinkers. I mean, like Bret Hart has the Vince McMahon debacle at 26.
Yeah.
Even like Shawn Michaels or some of your best candidates, well, when they were starting out, like the Orient Express match at WrestleMania 6 it wasn't meant to be a great match. We saw they could at Royal Rumble, but they weren't put in that position at WrestleMania 6. But I mean, that hurts your average because you can only review what was put in front of you. So,
question about the project as a whole, just because I'm curious your take on this. Do you feel like the WrestleMania performance is indicative of the WWE run? So what I mean is, do you think Ric Flair, would you put him at number 13 overall in terms of like quality WWE runs? Do you think WrestleMania captures that? I'm just curious how you'd see that.
Yeah. When we did the greatest WWFE performer of all time for PTB, I didn't have Flair at number 13. I know he was lower than that. But I would say from a consistency point and looking at the ratings, I think it checks out from his WWE runs. I mean, the 91-92 run, as we talked about, like for both me and you, like it's not our favorite version of Ric Flair, right? Like it's a WWE version of Ric Flair as the real world's champion, not as like the NWA touring champion. So it's not my favorite version. His like hardcore tribute act in 2004, 2005, shockingly produced some great matches with Triple H when I rewatched. Like I was astounded at how great those matches were a couple of years ago. I mean, maybe I think they're up there with Triple H's best matches ever. Like you put it with the Foley Rumble. Like I was blown away. And of like the Triple H cosplaying act that he gets critiqued for, I think it was the most genuine and closest he came to something that was like the 1983 Jim Crockett Promotions dog collar type blood feud or whatever. It was very interesting to watch back. So yeah, I mean, I think like in an overall project like this, I mean, you have people like the Undertaker, who's always a good person to bring up because he has some real big highs from like a WWF canon point, but has some real bad lows too. So I think with both of Flair's runs, he was more consistent, but really never was like the main character of the promotion or the main focal point of the promotion, besides maybe a short window of time from September of 91 till really WrestleMania 8. So it's a very small sliver of his career overall where he was the main focal point in the biggest promotion in the U.S. Since 1984 or whatever.
Right.
All righty. Well, Charles, thank you for joining me. Before we get out of here, let everyone know about Wrestling Playlist. Give it the elevator shield. Let's hear the elevator.
So, Wrestling Playlist is a daily newsletter that you can get into your inbox. We started at the earliest match that exists on tape, which is in October of the year 1899. So, right at the turn of the 20th century. And then we're trying to go all the way to the present day, 1 4-hour block at a time. So we're starting the year 1984 this week. We've gotten from 1899 through the end of 1983. And I've been doing it for about 2 years. It's a great project. I really enjoy it. Chad knows how much I like chronological footage projects, and this is exactly that. So the idea is to kind of go through and summarize like what's happening, be a resource for people to know what's out there. So if you're interested, you can sign up at wrestlingplaylist.substack.com.
Thank you. And I'll just give a quick shield. Like, me and Charles have talked a lot about when we think like modern wrestling kind of became modern wrestling. I think there's a couple of different jumping on points. I will say January 1984, I think, is a great jumping on point. If you want to just jump on, it starts right away when you get the Hulk Hogan versus what, Bill Dixon, is that's a squash
Yep.
match?
Yep.
Yeah, wrestling at the Chase. Like, that's one of the very first matches in 1984. Happened on the January 1st episode. And if you want to chronicle the wrestling that we all know and still follow in present day, that I think is a great place to start. And Charles does a wonderful job guiding you through with the email blast each and every day. So thank you, Charles, once again for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. If you want to follow me, you can at Twitter at Big Boys Play WCW. Check me out on the Wrestling Warzone podcast with Justin here on the North-South Connection. We just completed WrestleMania 13, and we'll be going into the pivotal April 1997 month of wrestling, which again, there's a lot going on with the Hart Foundation coming together and whatnot. So that's it of this edition of the NoSo Countdown. On to number 12.
All right, welcome to the North-South Connection WrestleMania Performers Countdown. Today, number 12, Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson for some, and I'm joined by a man who only has a name that I say from front to back, and that is Mark Poirier. Mark, how are you doing? Are you excited to talk Daniel Bryan?
I am. I'm doing great, Rocco. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, one of my all-time favorites, and was very pleased to be asked to talk about his WrestleMania career, and look forward to doing that with you right now.
I mean, he's a guy that I think it was a catalyst for the entire product really changing, and I think when we look at his WrestleMania performances, we're going to see that actually evidenced in the matches that we're going to talk about today. So it's cool, and I think WrestleMania is a good comp a lot of times to see where a guy's career is going and how it starts, and the dips and the arcs that it has. So I think it's interesting to see, and I'm very excited because there's some good shit in here that we're going to talk about. So
absolutely,
I'll just go through real quick. Started in 2010. He was not on that WrestleMania in 2010. He was fired a couple of months later for the infamous tie thing. 2011, a pre-show match with Sheamus for the U.S. title that turned into a clusterfuck battle royal, which I think a lot of people are angry about. So the first proper match is the WrestleMania 28 versus Sheamus for the World Heavyweight Championship. I mean, there's not much to talk about this match in ring, so you'll have a real quick summation of it right now.
Yeah, I mean, it clearly at the time it was, I remember there being a lot of fury online and with this result and the 18 seconds of it, but historically it led to, as we go through this list here, a big change in the company, and as you mentioned in the opening, and it propelled his career, because who knows where it would have went from that point on if the fans didn't get behind him like they did after this match.
Yeah, like when I look at these ratings that we use to metric to get the rankings, and Meltzer gives it a dud. The guy John Canton gives it a 0.25, however the fuck that means. Justin gave it a 3, which is what I would think, because I do not think a match starts in the ring. Like, the characters that when they enter the arena, I mean, there's the story that brings you to WrestleMania, but the second these guys walk into the ring, that's when the story begins. I don't really care about the in-ring action. And these guys do this, the story being told, no matter why it was being told, whatever backstage stuff, the way Daniel Bryan's character is and the way he carries himself to the ring with AJ and the championship, and like the way everything works with the kiss and everything like that is so masterfully done that I don't really care about 18 because you don't need more, why do you need more time to tell that story? Like, this is a hubristic dude getting his comeuppance in the fastest way possible. UFC fights end quickly. Like, Annie Hall won Best Movie. It was 90 minutes. You don't need a 3-hour movie to be a great movie. Like, there's the flash fiction, like Hemingway's famous short story of For Sale Baby Shoes Never Worn. Like, you could figure out, like, you don't need a bloated runtime or a lot of stuff to tell a simple story, a perfect story, right? So I think giving it a low rating is myopic and short-sighted to look at wrestling.
Yeah, it's a cop-out, really. I mean, Dave does it the way he does it. The way, I agree with you about the whole, from beginning coming down the aisle, the story gets in there and everything. And Bryan was such a dick to AJ that whole time, and for him to, bell rings, kiss, boot face, 1, 2, 3. I mean, what a great story. I mean, it was the opener with the world title. I mean, yeah, and people were, like I said, at the time, and I remember they were pretty damn angry about it. But I thought it was brilliant, and it was a great fitting move to continue Bryan's eventual, as we see going into the next Mania, his kind of descent into madness about his looks and how he was acting and, going from yes to no and all that other stuff, and the stuff with Kane we're about to talk about. So, I mean, to see that progression from the kick on is even all that is a great storytelling in itself as well as we go through the year.
Right. I mean, some people would say one punch is more, one good punch or one good kick is more vital or more important than 10 that just don't really mean a lot, right? So
exactly.
And like you said, so we're going to go to WrestleMania 29, the only match on this card that I was there live for in New Jersey. Tagging with Kane, World Tag Team Championship match versus Big E in his first match ever, if I'm not mistaken. And not ever, but in the company. And Dolph Ziggler with AJ Lee on the opposite side of Daniel Bryan this time. What'd you think of this one?
Ironically, I was also at this show. However, I was in line in the concession stand and missed the entire match because I picked the wrong line to go into. So now, obviously, going back and watching it, yeah, Big E's first main roster match. Watching it again and hearing being called Big E Langston, very jarring now in retrospect. I thought I'd just point that out if anybody hasn't watched that in a long time. With this match, it was very much the Big E show. I thought they were like obviously trying to get his strengths over, and Bryan was. They teased it the opening from the year prior with Dolph kissing AJ, and then Bryan getting a kick and getting a near fall. But I mean, I thought that was a really great open to the match. Bryan was kind of out of it for like a very large body of it. I mean, he did get the win at the end, but it was more Big E showing his power against the bigger Kane and thwarting him. But for Bryan himself, he came down with the nose, and then of course he ended with the yes, a chance. And as we're going to talk about in a moment, it was the beginning of the yes movement right from there. So not the best match, but definitely a good for the character arc of Daniel Bryan in WWE at the time.
And not really a great Mania, and having that ending was actually probably one of the cooler moments of that Mania.
Absolutely.
So it's cool, and like you said, like this is definitely this is in the middle of a story that we can continue, which is pretty wild to think of how much can happen to a character in 3 WrestleManias, and so we're going to a big one, 32 matches, Triple H to start the show, 30 minutes, just a fucking masterwork.
Yep.
Then to end the show, Batista, Randy Orton. We all know the story of how this happened and one of the craziest backstage things and fan revolts of all time. But we're going to talk about the WrestleMania matches. This is one of the best performances in a single WrestleMania of all time. He's in the ring for almost an hour. What were your thoughts go? Like, this was a big one, right? Like, I'm assuming you have a lot of strong emotions about it.
I really do. I know we talk about the past about that, we're talking about the Mania match, but I was in the building for the Rumble that year when he did not come out. And I'm not trying to be Tony Khan here or anything like that, but there was a fear for my life at the end of that show where I thought there might be a riot. And that was the craziest thing. I'm not the craziest thing I ever said on YouTube, but I mean, it is the craziest thing that people were so passionate around this time for him. And then the storyline with the authority and everything that, leading to the match, and then having to put him in. And the storyline to get there and working with Hunter. That match is so great. Hunter, it's one of Hunter's best. I mean, you can say what you want, but I think it's one of his best matches. Right up there in the top of his career overall.
Most given match, right? Like the most given an opponent.
Yeah, and just like, you know, him doing a crossface chicken wing and then him throwing a tiger suplex, like anything he's never done before, is just incredible. And the heat when Bryan's back on offense, and you know, to finally, you know, to get the knee plus, I guess they never really call it that, but that's what it sort of was kind of called at the time. To get the win in the first match is just an incredible, you know, and then Hunter, of course, the attack behind and to injure him even more, the shoulder leading into the main event. I don't know if you want to talk about the main event before I talk about it, but I can go right into that if you want. But
it's one story. It's one
story, yeah. So, you know, obviously Bryan coming back injured, and you know, eventually, you know, Batista and Orton deciding that they need to get rid of this asshole, and they do that powerbomb or reverse RKO to the table, and you know, he just battled through so many odds from the beginning of the night, and then battling back and almost getting stretchered out, and crooked referees, and Hunter coming back out being a dick, and Stephanie coming out being a dick, and then finally getting the comeback and tapping out Batista to, you know, complete the story of this arc of his WrestleMania and his career in WWE, and the huge moment, standing on the table with the pyro going off and the confetti and the whole 9 yards. It's, you know, as a huge Bryan fan as I am and was at the time, and it was like, you know, the best thing I could see for me as a fan for him. And I really, you know, it's a masterpiece, like you said. And, you know, how can you go wrong with this match? These matches, I should say.
Right. It really felt big. It felt important. There's always that element of danger where you're like, are they going to fuck us over? Are they just doing this to fuck us over?
Yeah.
Right? Is it going to be trips in the main event? Like, is trips going to come out? And like, when you watch things in retrospect, a lot of times you do have to look at it in a historical reference. And then when you factor in with Daniel Bryan, the Connor moment in the beginning, which I didn't even really pick up on at the time, but I've watched the documentary, and it's a very emotional thing when you really watch it back. Also, he's wearing his Bruiser Brody boots, which is one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. So that was another plus. But like, you take all these things and you factor them in, and then you take the behind-the-scenes stuff in there. And I don't know how you don't think of this as such a great moment. It's kind of wild to think it happened at 30 as well, which is like, wow, it's like the big anniversary and this thing happens. But like, in this trilogy of matches, you have this dude who's like, he starts off as the bad guy and has this catastrophic event. This then is turning into a changing with the meeting. Like, the monster almost makes him the good guy, which is kind of a funny story.
Yeah.
And by this moment, he is just the conquering hero. And this is the kind of story that they don't tell a lot, with a human being overcoming the monster. It's always the superhuman dude, the scene as the Hogans, but like, this guy was such a dude, a guy. And to me, it's like, if you're a kid, yeah, it's great to see heroes and superheroes and giant men do impressive things, but to be inspired, you see this guy, this smaller dude, this guy who works hard, is just born gifted and massive like a Hulk Hogan or a John Cena. It's just really just emotional storytelling, and at its finest. And he's great at it, you know, and he's amazing. He was the way he can emote in just with his face is not talked about enough. And I think it's just impressive. And the fact that he took Batista down, this giant monster, right? Like, it wasn't just a quick roll up. He tapped out one of the biggest dudes.
Yeah.
A monster guy, made this guy quit with just like tenacity. And it's such an impressive piece of storytelling. And just like to tell that story, that hour of his in-ring action, it's just amazing, right?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. He, you know, as you know, obviously I grew up in the Hulk Hogan era, and you know, obviously my taste changed as I got older, and you know, after who did what he did in 07 and who was my favorite, and you know, now I had to pick a new favorite, and I latched on to Bryan really quick, and you know, he's the guy, still my guy, and to see him overcome and to take the company into a different direction ring wise, you know, the Punk stuff happened, and then he kind of like slipped into it sort of that way, and you know, obviously, as we see going after this, it did not, you know, the story didn't really carry on due to injuries and other factors, I guess, as we continue on to the story here of Bryan in WrestleMania. So, but for that, you know, in a vacuum in that moment to close that arc is incredible.
Well, like you said, where we're going next is kind of like, he's the world champ. About a month in, he disappears, and then when he comes back, a lot of people thought he might not ever come back, but he comes back in WrestleMania 31. I think his moment. Sorry, I'll go through the match. It's a ladder match for the Intercontinental Championship. I do not have the competitors in front of me right now, but it's like a who's who of upper mid card dudes, right? Like, this is a star-studded one. This is a great ladder match. Some crazy spots, but when I think of that WrestleMania, there's some negative things I think about, but like him on top of the ladder with the wind blowing in his face and his face kind of beat up from the headbutts, and the way you're seeing, like, he changed his character. He's still the good guy, but he's like this. I don't want to say scrappier, but just the way he carried himself was different. Like, this is the guy who knows how to get over and change and become a different person and wrestle in a different way. So, like, that was him on top of that ladder is one of my favorite. When I think of 31, I think of that and a couple of smaller things. But do you remember this match finally? Do you remember?
I do, and but the only thing I didn't remember finally until going back and watching it is that R-Truth is actually in this match, which kind of blew my mind a little bit. It was with Luke Harper, Dean Ambrose, Wade Barrett, Dolph Ziggler. And Stardust. How can I forget? Right. So it was like the who's who of mid card at that time, and like you said, Bryan was becoming more grizzled. I think there was kind of some, if my memory's right, there was kind of like there was a lot of discord with his character at the time. He had gone away. He was coming back. I think he was kind of cheating a little bit at some points during his run, if I'm not mistaken. And people were really upset about how they just, went from that incredible story so early and then to kind of start turning him, it seemed like that. But obviously injuries were a factor. This is a great match. I don't know about, like, maybe you disagree with me, but like this seemed like Bryan was in it terribly a lot, and that was more carried by the other dudes. And I mean, maybe they were worried about his injuries. And then again, why did you book him in a ladder match to begin with in the first place? So I don't know if you want to touch on that quickly, but yeah, but it's still a great match, and it is a great moment, like you said, with the win, the opening match of the Mania. A lot of disappointing things, but obviously one great thing at the end of that Mania. So a great moment for him, the Intercontinental title. We get into as that would progress from there, it did not go so well for his career for a number of years after that. So we can go touch on that as we go along here.
Right. I mean, it's tough to stand out with a ladder match when you're not the one doing the, Kofi Kingston crazy thing, or isn't this the one that Ambrose got
powerbomb?
I don't want, he's probably smart for not being the guy to get fucking wrecked like Ambrose on this. So, but like, once again, like, just a dude standing, like, how many ladder matches end with a dude blasting another dude in the face with headbutts?
Right. Great finish. I totally agree with you. Absolutely great finish to that match.
He's good at innovating. And I do remember there was some fucking dumb shits afterwards, like, who are a home doctor giving this guy doctor advice when they know nothing about his life. Like, oh, well, what a fool he is. Yeah, well, he's proved you wrong. So yeah, like, he does go away after that. He misses a couple WrestleManias. We all thought he had retired. And this might be if you're just going to give a match a star rating, 3.5, whatever you want to give it. But this next match is kind of massively disappointing when you really think about it.
Yeah, 100%.
Tagging with Shane, Kevin Owens, and Sami Zayn. It's weird because I think a lot of people like me or you might think, like, fuck, he's in a tagging with Shane. In the WWF, that's supposed to be a big thing, but we don't give a shit. Like,
zero.
You got him with Owens and Zayn, so you have three dudes who are like Ring of Honor guys, and like there was nothing. There's no other story you could tell. And once again, it's like sometimes, like, why is Shane McMahon in this entire match when this is the first match Daniel Bryan is in fucking a million years? So I just think it was a super. You talk about tone deaf for 30, leading up to 30. The comeback here is insanely tone deaf, if you ask me.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess they felt maybe their hands were tied, because in the storyline, Bryan and Shane were, they started feuding with each other, and kind of seemed like Bryan was going heel in the GM role and siding with Kevin and Sami. And then maybe when they knew that Bryan was coming back, they kind of flipped it, and Bryan fired them, and then they beat him up. And this match was to get Sami and Kevin their jobs back. And then, of course, they opened by attacking Bryan and powerbombing him on the apron, and they lay him out. So Shane McMahon and his, having to do like the worst pump kick you ever saw in your life. Just the drizzling shits. It was bad. And
one of my most hated tropes, I've talked about it in many things, when they do the fake guy gets taken out and isn't in the match and then comes back, it's like, it's never worked. Like, I don't know whoever in that company thinks that's how you make a guy come back when he takes one move that sometimes people get up in a minute from.
Yeah.
It never works. This is a terrible way to do it. Like, people are dying to see this dude, and that's what you give them. It just, is it a fuck you to us? Is it a fuck you to him? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, the mechanics of this match are fine, I guess, but I don't want to watch this. Like, this is such a waste of these dudes. And that whole Owen Zayn thing was just like that mid-card heel nonsense that they love to do with like Truth and Miz and Morrison and Miz. Usually Miz is involved in some way, but like
it's the tag team mid-card is definitely Miz involved.
But the two heels who are just such like pestery dudes who like, come on, we don't need this for a guy who like 3 Manias ago had one of the most important moments in the history of WrestleMania.
Well, and now it's like same building they were at for this match too. It was in New Orleans too. So for them to come back with that, I was just like, what a wet fart that was, like, and a complete misfire. There's only one person to blame, and you know who it is. It's the man on top. Who this is why he thought that this would be a good storyline, but it's never worked. It never worked for Roman in that Rumble where he came back, left and came back. It's never worked. Stop doing it. Hopefully Paul Levesque will figure this out now and not do this anymore. But it was a complete misfire on Bryan, and happy he was back, obviously. But it got a little better here going into our next Mania, though. That's for sure.
You say that, and you are absolutely correct. I mean, this is just another masterwork of now. The perennial underdog babyface goes into WrestleMania as the most hated dude on the roster, with a big man on his side, right? Because Rowan was still with him at this point.
Yep, Rowan was with him. Yeah,
he's baiting the fans. He's the crunchy champion. I mean, this character was so perfect and crafted, and this match, like the build to Kofi, this was, I mean, I guess you could say like he's kind of doing DB for 30. He's doing a similar trajectory, but not really, because Kofi was a character for 10 years we've been watching. DB had not been around. Kofi was always the baby face, always getting shit on. DB kind of came out of nowhere. So this story is singular into itself, I think. And I mean, is there a guy who could play a heel better than Daniel Bryan? I don't think so, man.
I don't think so.
No. I mean, on the mic, always underrated. But in the ring, the little things he does, Bret Hart level of doing the small things that are just such jerk moves in a wrestling match when you're a bad guy that don't get done anymore. When you go back and you watch some older shit, you see those little things, the little nuances that just make the bigger picture more defined. Is this one of your? Would this be one of your faves for?
It's another one I was in the building for this. Okay. Yeah. An incredible moment for Kofi. I mean, you watching him start off as the boom boom guy on ECW and to get to the WWE title match at WrestleMania, a great moment for him. So and seemed as he was being called at the time, the new Daniel Bryan, the Earth's champion with his hemp belt. Just calling the fans fickle and just being a complete asshole, and just talking about like all the waste on Earth and all what the consumption of humans are doing with pork products and everything, like everything going into it was so great. And him calling Kofi a B+ player, turning everything around that was said about him. And I get, and not Vince not really siding with him in the storyline, but just like not wanting Kofi for whatever reason you want to say, to put those roadblocks in front of him but then to finally Kofi getting his win. And Bryan is so good in that match, just dissecting him, picking him apart, stretching him and everything. And Kofi, eventually gets out of it. He gets the Trouble in Paradise and gets the big kick, and gets that really great moment with the New Day crying in the ring, brings his sons in the ring.
How did that feel? How did that feel live when he won? Were you
incredible? I was happy for the dude. I mean, obviously, like I said, Bryan's my guy, but to see Bryan, give him the rub to him of the putting him over and strong at the end. I think Bryan took a lot of the match. I mean, not to say that there's nothing wrong with that, but Bryan did a lot, and Kofi, did the big comeback to get just kind of a kick out of nowhere. I thought maybe. I mean, I'm wrong, but it was still a great match, and live in the arena or in the stadium, it was incredible. I was freezing to death, but that was besides the point. But it warmed my heart to see Kofi pull off the win and Bryan have such a great performance, especially after coming back the year prior to such a god-awful position that he was put into.
Yeah, man, and like Daniel Bryan, like in this match, like you're saying, he took a lot of the match, and I think that's appropriate for him. And he's got the ability to really seem like a vicious asshole in a match. Yep. And like your suspension is always you always there is always a suspension of disbelief because it seems like those kicks really seem like he's killing this dude, and like he seems so angry and so motivated that like the odds do seem insurmountable when this guy is such a savage, and the perennial like this guy with a chip on his shoulder. It's kind of funny because like most of the things he's saying about everything he's saying about climate change is 100% right, but like as the heel, that's always the good heel too.
Come on, we know, but we can hear it.
It's the guy that you don't want to hear that guy thing, but it's like shit, he's right. But yeah, what a beautiful match, what a beautiful moment, and like as giving as Trips was to him in 30, he is as giving to
absolutely
Kofi in this like feud, and like really great shit, man. All right, from highs to lows.
Yeah,
I mean, a match that on paper sounds like a dream match. It's in the No Arena WrestleMania versus Sami Zayn. There's a whole cavalcade of dudes with Sammy, and he's got Gulak with him. This is the strangest thing that I have fucking no recollection of until I popped it on, and I'm like, oh shit, this happened, huh?
Yeah, COVID was a wild time for everybody, and kind of like blocking things out of, especially the empty arena, and then to the Thunderdome as they would get to later on. An incredibly disappointing thing with two dudes who can go, and if they were given the chance to, Sammy was just being like the chicken shit heel and stalling, and it was Nakamura and Cesaro out there with Sammy, and you said Gulak. Bryan got turned on by Rowan, and then Gulak feuded with Bryan, and they were buddies, and then they're doing like the Yuji Nagata hug in the ring, warming up. It was wild. Like I like the pairing, but
it's like 5 amazing dudes involved in a match.
And it was just a whole lot of nothing, and then Bryan jumped and got kicked in the face, and it was over just under 10 minutes, and it was like, what happened? Like, where, like, that's it? Like, you were like...
It's like you got an empty arena, you have all the time in the world in a world that is weird, and you could fill it with a nice classic 20-minute match. I don't know. Sammy, like, I love matches. I love old school heel crowd, like, stalling and all that kind of begging off shit. I love shit like that. But you need a crowd to do that. You can't. It doesn't work.
Mojo Rawley, that was it. Like that was your crowd in that match. I'm like,
it's really nothing. It's like just a nothing thing.
It's what we got. It's not rated 2.5. It was dud city for me. It was there. It was very disappointing.
Which is a shame. I mean, when you go because DB had that amazing match with Gulak. Was that before this or after this?
It was before. They had a match before at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, I believe.
Yeah, that was one of the fucking best matches of the year.
Yeah, and then I think the shut because that was like the last pay-per-view before the world shut down, and then we moved on to that.
I mean that whole fucking card is a thing that no one wants to really remember. So I don't know. At 2.5 seems like whatever. It's not going to throw his average off in this, and then a year later we get Daniel Bryan versus Edge versus Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship. You might have stronger feelings than I do about this, so
I might. I thought this match was great. First off, it's definitely up there. I mean, when we look at the ratings of Bryan's matches at Mania, it definitely where it should be, I guess. But I thought it was great. With Bryan being inserted after getting screwed before by Edge. Edge won the Rumble. Getting to this match, Bryan got inserted. Great performance by everybody involved. Bryan again, just he's just so good, like in intensity. And I thought like each time, like even got in there with Edge, they had a little stare down. And they were just like they from the chair shot from the month before, and they just had this great battle. And the beginning of this is Roman's the beginning of the run-ins and the Roman matches and things like that with Jey Uso. I mean, you kind of, in retrospect now we see it a lot. It was kind of newish back there, so you kind of forgave it. But overall, I thought it was a tremendous match with everybody involved. And, as of now, it is the end of never say never, but the end of Daniel Bryan's WWE career. And I thought it was a good way to go out for Mania for him so far. If it is
just showing once again how he's amazing, and like we need Roman Reigns to have this is to me it's like his only second really good WrestleMania match besides getting his shit pushed in by Brock. So what did you need? You needed fucking one of the most popular dudes from Attitude through the early 210s and stuff. You need Edge or to come back and Daniel Bryan and give Roman a great match. Bryan's done it with Roman before. Yeah, that WrestleMania, everything's inflated because it was such a big deal to be back in front of fans and stuff. And yeah, it's a cool match. But DB holds that match together completely.
Absolutely.
100%. So, the trajectory of this dude is pretty amazing to watch. Always high level stuff when you think, even when he was early, he was world championships and tag championships and just always in interesting things. Even like we said, the Shane part of it with Sammy, that was a big storyline on SmackDown that year. So a guy that you always kind of think of as a guy that was shit on, but did get cool opportunities at Mania and always delivered and showed that he's a chameleon with how he could do anything. He could slot anywhere in the card, have amazing matches with anyone, and bring an emotionality to matches as a bad guy, as a good guy, as this dude against Roman with Ed, as the veteran now. He ends 10 years of WrestleManias, and he's the veteran guy, and he's, and he leaves out a really cool thing, and just shows you why he's so goddamn good.
Absolutely. Like I said, he's obviously one of the, arguably one of the best ever, and to have a pretty good WrestleMania track record behind him, put him in every Hall of Fame. He's the man, and he just has this way of connecting with the audience, good or bad. Like you said, he just has whatever inside of him, whether they respect his work rate or his storytelling. He can do the comedy, he can do the serious, he can do everything, and he's one of the greatest ever. And he's still killing it elsewhere, but he did have a great, pretty great, WrestleMania career. And like I said, never say never, right?
Yeah, we'll never know. Number 12 seems pretty good for me. Yeah. There's some guys in the ahead of him that maybe I could push him ahead of, but not too bad. And my favorite thing here, I think New Orleans is probably my favorite. That's just perfect. What a great story, what a great matches. So, and God, there's so much good shit. We don't have I'm sorry. I'm just thinking about a guy that I was just kind of when you don't. Sometimes when you see these lists on paper, it's so much more impressive than when you don't have have it right in front of your face, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Pretty incredible for a guy who got, like you said, fired in 2010, come back and to overcome everything,
Hires twice almost, and then
retires and all this, and to have the stellar career that he's had. It's pretty incredible.
Cool, man. I'm happy we got to talk about this guy together. I'm happy happy he exists. And this was great, Mark. Do you have anything special you want to plug or talk about?
If you listen to ChroNoSo Monthly, I usually say I have nothing to plug, so I'll just plug that if and when I'm on that. So that's all I got for now.
I'm on that too. My band Chained to the Dead exists as well. It's on the @ underneath my face. I look very pale in this video. I feel like Daniel Bryan right now. I look like a fucking...
You got the beard going, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's about it. I gotta get outside a little more. It's been gross weather here in New Jersey. Thanks, Mark, for hanging out with me tonight. And coming up is number 11. Who's it gonna be? I don't know. I can look it up. But... All right. Take care.
See ya.
All right, North-South Connection. We continue on with the greatest WrestleMania Performers countdown, and we are here with number 11. And I'm here with Scott Criscuolo. Scott, what is going on, buddy?
RG. Always a pleasure, man. It's good to be with you. I look at the name. Wait, here we go. The name above me, and I assume that's the only reason I'm. No, I'm only kidding. The only reason I'm on is this guy's name right here. No, thank you. No, it's a pleasure to be on. I've enjoyed the countdown so far. It's been a lot of fun, and I appreciate you having me on. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, let's. There's a lot of matches here, a lot of meat to sink our teeth into. So let's kind of get into it now, Scott. Typically, you wear a baseball shirt and a baseball hat.
I know.
So that gave me an idea steal a baseball gimmick for Triple H.
Okay.
The boy has 23 WrestleMania matches. So to kick us off here, I am just going to say the WrestleMania, and you're going to tell me if it's either a strikeout, a single, a double, a triple, or a home run of a match. And then after that, we'll take one strikeout. We'll dive into it. We'll take one single. We'll dive into it. One double. We'll dive into it. And then the high end stuff we'll kind of sink our teeth into. And that's kind of what we're going to do with Triple H instead of being here for about 75 minutes going through his WrestleMania resume.
As long as an average Triple H WrestleMania match.
Yeah, we ain't got time for that. So
I know. Yeah.
Let's start with the first one. WrestleMania 12. What did he hit?
Oh, that's a strikeout. It did him no favors. He was the sacrificial lamb. Vince was trying to push Warrior, and it did him nothing. It did him no favors. So I almost pretend sometimes that match doesn't even exist. So that's a definite strikeout.
13.
Goldust. It's a single. It's a good match. Good back and forth. Nothing earth-shattering.
14.
Owen. I want to give it a double, but it's not. I don't think it's quite a double. I think it's like a single if, like, somebody slow, like who's running the bases. It should be a double, but it's only a single. I feel like it didn't hit the next. Yeah, exactly. A poppy hit. It didn't go out of the ballpark, but it smacked off the wall, and he thought it was a home run and stopped at first. That's what that match is. So I'll give that a long single.
All right, 15.
Kane.
Got the angle.
Yeah, the angle was good. It would lead to something later in the night. I'm going to give that a single. That was another one I was hoping would be a double, but I feel like Kane wasn't quite at that point yet where he could do the dance like he might be able to do later on. So I'm going to give that one. I'm going to give another long single too.
16.
I think it was a double. I want to give it a triple, but the ending was not. Well, I like the ending, but I think the ending kind of turned people off. But I think it was a great match, and I think they booked it right in the sense that they got rid of Mick and Show kind of early, and then everybody really just wanted to see Blake. Yeah, I wanted to see him and Rock, and they went at it for like 2/3 of that length of that match. So I'm going to give it it's a solid double. It's a solid double, almost a triple, but not quite.
17.
I'm going to give it a double. It was a perfect Attitude Era match for him and Taker. The best would be yet to come from them, but it was fun. It was a good brawl. I think if it was on a different time in the card, maybe it would have gotten a little bit more, but it definitely was a double. It definitely was a double, but close to a triple, but not quite. I'll give it a double.
18.
I'm going to give it a double. I think it was a good match. I think it gets clouded, of course, by the moment right before. Obviously, everybody thinks that Rock Hogan should have been last, and it probably should have been. But if you're looking at the match as a standalone, I thought it was perfectly fine under the circumstances. So I give it a solid double.
19.
19 is a single. The storyline was terrible. The match was okay. The ending was so bad. Like, I understand the pedigree is a great finisher, but Booker T was out for it seemed like 12 minutes before Triple H finally pinned him. I think it got clouded by the fact that almost all the matches on that WrestleMania were better than that one. So I can't give it more than a single. It's not a strikeout. It's not that bad, but I can't give it higher than a single.
I'm actually higher than that on that match than most. 20.
I think 20 is a triple. I know it's the match nobody wants to talk about, but the match is a banger. I was there sitting right next to JR watching it live. It was a perfect storytelling because, to say quickly, that ending when Shawn was out of the ring and Benoit was on the ropes and Triple H got up all wonky and everybody was like, oh no, it was a typical Triple H ending where he pulls a pedigree out of his butt and instead he got put in the CrossFit. The crowd went crazy. I thought it was a great match. Fell short of a home run. I think it could have been a home run if it was just the two of them, but Shawn makes the rules up as he goes along. That shouldn't be a triple threat unless I'm in it, but I give it a triple.
21.
21's a double. It's the worst of their three. To use the same analogies, their match at Vengeance was a home run, a grand slam. The match at Backlash is probably a harder hit double.
I was at that one. It was pretty good.
Maybe a triple. Rotella was at that show, right? That was one in New Hampshire. I think jamming all those title wins at the end kind of killed the buzz, but I thought it was a solid double. I think the two put on a good match.
22. Interested on this one.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a triple. I think it was a really fun match. The more I watch that match, the more I think that I don't think Cena was as carried as Shawn thinks he carried him at 23, but the ending was great. I think it was a good, solid main event to a really good, balanced WrestleMania card. So I may be overgrading this one a scoosh, but I'm going to give it a triple.
I dig it. 24.
I think that's another double. Match had no heat. It was kind of a convoluted mess. Cena winning the Rumble, and then he cashes in it No Way Out instead, and then we got to have Triple H in it, and of course he ends up winning it at Backlash anyway. Orton was awesome in that stretch. I thought he was a fantastic champion. JR and I documented it on the Place to Be podcast. But the match just didn't click for me. Neither title match really clicked for me on that show. Maybe because I was so emotional about Flair, but it didn't hit it the next gear to maybe make it a triple. So I might be generous giving it a double. It was probably more of a hard single, but I'm going to give it a double.
All right, 25.
The match goes back and forth for me. I remember we talked about it on the show. I'm going to give it a single. It needed a gimmick. Because if Triple H could have lost the belt on a DQ, I think they should have sauced up the gimmicks a little bit, and they didn't. And again, overshadowed by arguably one of the greatest matches ever. It just fell flat for me. And I think it fell flat for a lot of people. So I can't give it more than a single.
Back-to-back times were a very, very top WrestleMania match. Kind of cucked Triple H there.
Yeah.
26, much earlier in the card.
Yeah. I like the match. I'm giving it a double. I think him and Sheamus hit the shit out of each other. I really liked it. I've always liked that match. So I thought that card is balanced well. Solid double for me on that one. I think it's a better match than people remember.
Yeah, I'm pretty high. I went 3.25. All right, 27.
Triple. I give that a triple. I love that match. Love it. I know a lot of people don't like the storyline because Triple H was all about beating him, and then he kept yelling at him to stay down. And I like when he said, "You won the battle, I won the war," and Taker to get carried out. I know that's a hard match for people to like because the rest of the card was a little wonky, but I love that match. That match is fantastic. So I give it a triple.
I'm hanging a curveball to you. 28.
That's a home run. That's a home run.
That was good.
Beginning to end, it's a home run. Nothing about that match is wrong, in my opinion. The drama leading up to it, a Hell in a Cell at Mania was perfect for them. Shawn is the ref. The super kick in the pedigree, you thought they were this close. That would have been a few times I would have enjoyed being a heel and loving the fact that he would have broke the streak and everybody would have hated it, and I would have loved it and everybody would have hated me. But the match was amazing. And them, as you see here on our graphic right below me, that moment just got me very emotional. The Metallica song, everything about that package was amazing. So that to me will always be a home run.
I watched that last night. I'm low at 4.5. Definitely. All right. Well, we'll bring in a new relief pitcher for this one because you just crashed a home run. 29.
I give it a double, which might be generous. The match as a standalone was not. This might be me Triple H-ish, but if that match was in an arena, I think people would look at it more fondly. Those kind of matches are hard in a stadium where they're wrestling very close and there's weapons and stuff, but you're way up in the cheap seats, and it didn't reflect well in an 80,000 seat place. I think it would have been better the following month if they did that and then maybe did another match in a cage, but they had to do the second match because, of course, the previous for SummerSlam he broke his arm and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to give it a double. I think people are going to think I'm overgrading, but I think as a bubble, it's not a bad match. I just think it was in the wrong venue. It would have been better suited in a smaller arena.
All right, 30. We're getting long in the tooth here with Triple H. 30.
Yeah, I know. That's a home run. It lines up with Owen Brett as maybe the greatest WrestleMania opener of all time, if not maybe the greatest pay-per-view opener of all time. He put over Daniel Bryan strong, kept the storyline going throughout the whole rest of the night, and it was just on the stream at work. We had WWE's one of my clients, and they have Randy Orton's best matches stream on, and that match was on. I'm looking up. I'm like, wow, they were building the shit out of that and the yeses and everything. And I think that started from the beginning of the night where Triple H, put him over strong and then beat the crap out of him after. It was the first time that I think Triple H appreciated his internet hate. I think he finally embraced it and made money off it. So that match is a home run, though. I mean, yeah, it's Daniel Bryan. I mean, it's hard to not have a home run with him, but Triple H did everything right in that match to get him over for that moment and let the drama build till the main event.
All right, 31.
I'm going to say a double. The match itself is not bad. I'll be honest with you. I'm probably in the minority of Triple H fans that think Sting should have went over. Obviously, the Terminator thing was funny. It's one of his more comical costume entrances. I always have a problem with that show because 2/3 of that show is in the sunshine, which takes the starch out of everything.
I like the aspect of that. Yeah.
Well, it does. I will say this. It did add to like an old school, like 80s outdoor show, like the one at like WrestleFest in Milwaukee and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But the NWO coming out and then DX, it just wasn't. It was a typical like Triple H like overbooked mess. But the match as a standalone was fine. Sting looked good. I'll give it a double. I might be a little generous, but the only thing Triple H definitely should have laid down for him.
32, his last main event, which just ended.
That's a grand slam. No, I'm just kidding. No, no. It's I know, right? That's a corked bat home run right there. Rigged. No.
Maybe so over here.
I know. Yeah. Albert Bell. I don't think it's single bad. I'll give it. Maybe I'm being mildly generous. I'm going to give it a double. It's probably a 2.5-star match. Again, you try and look at these matches in a bubble. It's not that bad. It's bad because the match started at 3:00 in the morning. It's funny how that was one of the longest manias ever, and 2/3 of the roster was hurt. This is really crazy. Yeah. The match was too long. This was one time where Triple H should probably have called an audible and said, "Why don't we get this sucker down maybe 12 minutes and move on?" Having said that, it's not that bad. There's a lot of problems with it. The crowd hated the crazy. Triple H is in essence the babyface, but as a standalone, I don't think it's that terrible. I'll give it a soft double.
I'll give it an infield single with an error that advances to second.
A bunt.
All right, 33, Seth Rollins.
I don't love that match. I give it a single. I didn't love it. I didn't love the storyline. I know they were trying to use it as a put over, which by then Vince was pissed at him anyway when he came back from injury the year before. It was okay. It was just another match. I didn't feel any emotion towards it.
Yeah, 34.
I'll give that a double. It takes a lot of guts, show some ass to a woman in the ring, and Ronda, before she got incredibly stale, Ronda was totally got the job done there. He was in a perfect spot. Again, that was another match where I think the internet heat helped. And, everybody hates Stephanie too, at least the character Stephanie. I think that worked out well. Kurt looked good. The crowd was hot for it. So solid double.
Okay. His last match, if only we knew, 35.
I'm going to give it a single. There's a video of me water spitting. I think JR did it. But obviously not the best Batista match from him, obviously. I think it got tired fast. I think it was just to let him win his last match, and then he can go in the Hall of Fame whenever he feels like it in perpetuity. That card was all about the all-women's main event and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like that show's a blur to me. Most of it was. That match was just kind of there to give Batista his win, let him go off in the sunset. Probably was another one that was probably too long. I think it was almost 30. I don't think it needed to be almost 30. So pare that sucker down. Maybe it's a double, but I have to. In all honesty, I can't give it more than a single.
So here's WrestleMania stats. With 23 total matches, he has a star rating total of 3 graders of 3.21 stars. He had 7 main events. He was in 9 world title matches, and to be an all-time match, it had to be a 4 or above from one of our 3 graders, and he has 5 all-time matches. So I would say if the Mendoza line is a thing, I would say he's well above the Mendoza line. I think 11 is very warranted. It may perhaps get hated, but I heard a lot of doubles. I heard a lot of singles. And I heard some triples and some home runs. And I didn't hear a lot of strikeouts. So what we're going to do here, Scott, is I'm going to pick one of your doubles. I'll pick one of your singles, so on and so forth.
Sure.
Your strikeout, the Ultimate Warrior, dud from Meltzer, dud from Canton. And I gave it 2.5. I think it's a decent moment. I think Triple H's performance in it is really strong. And it does the job of putting the Ultimate Warrior over. Perhaps was it a blimp in the radar of a return? Yes. But for a WrestleMania moment, it was built up well. And I thought it was totally fine for what it was.
Obviously, from the very beginning, Vince probably saw in Triple H a guy that knew the business. He was a fanboy. Vince liked fanboys because he understood things. Obviously, the reward came later in the year than it was supposed to be. He was supposed to win King of the Ring before the curtain call. But historically, that worked out better for him and for the company and for wrestling in general. I was just thinking, you said 2.5, and I'm thinking, really? 2.5? And I'm thinking, well, you know what?
Way in the moments,
Sometimes you got to grade more than the work rate, and I feel like a lot of people don't do that.
Even within the small structure of the match, the work rate was great, and this layout was really good. You remember Triple H hitting him with the pedigree and the Warrior warrioring up. It was effective. So 2.5, I think, is very fair.
Hindsight's 2020. Again, when we talk about matches like that, you're talking about being in a bubble, and for that moment, Vince was pumped. He had Warrior back. The Monday Night War hadn't really started yet, not for a couple of months. So he just wanted to get his guy back because Hogan was gone and whatever and all that kind of stuff. But Triple H was the guy that he picked because he was the guy that I knew would eat it best and not bitch.
Yeah.
And he didn't. And then 2 months later, his best friend served him to the wolves. So he was probably the best guy to do the job to Warrior 4. So yeah, it's a strikeout in a match sense because it's 15 seconds or whatever the hell it was, a minute or a minute and a half. But you know what? I can't give it a single. That's I can't do that. But maybe it was a deep fly to left center that got caught at the track. It was an out, but maybe it wasn't an embarrassing out. And for Triple H, it was a moment that he's like, listen, I'll do anything for this business, even eating a plate for this doofus who probably isn't going to stick around anyway, and he didn't. For the match, it's a strikeout, but I like your thinking that for the moment and for what needed to be done in that moment, 2.5 is actually pretty reasonable.
Yep. Now I'm going to take your single. I'm going to take Booker T. I'm a little higher on that. I went 3.5. Meltzer 3.25. Canton 3.25. Also for a 3.33 average. 18 minutes 45 seconds. I thought it was well worked. I thought that of course, the finish is extremely controversial, but I really liked the limb work, and I really liked that Indian deathlock that Triple H would apply. I thought Booker T sold that really well, and I like the structure. And it's pretty short for a Triple H WrestleMania World Title match, so I thought it was worked well. But of course, you can't overcome that 37-second pedigree stall that was that we already touched upon. So we're not going to bury Booker T any farther. We're just going to kind of move on from that one.
Yeah.
The double that I'm going to take from you here next is the Randy Orton at WrestleMania 25. 2.5 across the board. Meltzer, Canton, and myself, all 2.5. Why, Scott? Why would Triple H, a very smart mind in this business, going into this feud, they know it's a blood feud. It's built up well. Orton kissed his wife, punted his father-in-law. They had that awesome angle at the house. There's a lot of history with these guys. These guys wanted to tear each other apart. Why the hell would Triple H, I know it's kayfabe, but why would Triple H say it's a good idea to go out there and have a world title match after the Undertaker match and say if Triple H is counted out or disqualified, he would lose the title? Totally hampered and killed the whole structure of the feud. It killed the crowd that was already dead.
I mean, when you go back to, I agree. I mean, when you go back to when they were feuding in 2007 and into 2008, that was about gold. That was about Randy Orton trying to take his spot from his former Evolution boss. This is different. I mean, he's kicking his father. And that was, I'll never forget that moment when on Raw, when Triple H is handcuffed to the things and he's looking down and Stephanie's just standing there, laying there with her lips out. And I mean, it's amazing. How would you not put a stip on that?
It takes away Shane. It takes away Vince that were in the feud. It takes away Legacy. It was just whatever.
Yeah. No, it was, the stip was dumb. I think that was always something that maybe irritated people, is that, Triple H is smart enough to understand what's a good, how to lay this out. Now that I'm in the main event, and then, and all of a sudden you look and his best friend just put on arguably the greatest match of all time. You're like, oh crap. But they had already painted themselves into a corner they couldn't get out of. And they went through it as best they could. Well, they probably could have shortened that match, probably about 5 or 6 minutes. I'm stunned. I'm looking back just again quick. I'm stunned that Meltzer and these guys gave 3 stars to that Booker T match. I'm stunned.
It's really well worked.
It is. I think people, you know what? I think I'm coming up on one of my Chrono watches. I'm looking forward to watching it again.
Let's hear back from you there. It's really well worked. I love the invention with the Indian deathlock. It's just really good. But we can't go backwards here, Scott. We're deep into this here.
We are deep into the weeds. You're right. I love the Indian deathlock, by the way. A 25 match needed more a more personal gimmick. It's the same thing, like, to use another example, it's the same thing as when he rematched Steiner at No Way Out 03. No. They already put that slop fest pile of crap at the Rumble, which was comically bad. And then they did the same match a month later, and then the comic part left, and it was just bad. And the same thing happened here. They didn't read the room. So,
but how was the room here on this triple that you hit, that you were there live at WrestleMania 20? Shawn Michaels, Chris Benoit. I thought they did a masterful job putting over Benoit. I know you can't really, it's not really looked back upon within history, but we can shine a light on it here from Triple H's aspect. First of all, those white boots were fantastic. But he did a great job of really putting the spotlight on Chris Benoit on this night. And Shawn Michaels, too, was bumping, diving, and shooking, and they both got a crimson mask. And like you talked about earlier, the fake out of Triple H hooking up and then tapping out was really, really good. And just one quick moment, could you put yourself in the stands? How was it when he actually tapped out? Was it just like an all-time atmosphere?
It's crazy. JR and I hugged. It was wild. We actually hugged. It was crazy. We're high-fiving strangers. That moment, though, when Triple H finally taps out, because I'm telling you, Ryan, literally 2 minutes before, Benoit's looking over the ropes. Shawn's out on the announce table. He's done. And Triple H gets that, how he does, gets up, that half out of it. And everyone's like, oh, because most people thought, oh, Triple H is going to steal this one because Backlash the next month was in Edmonton. And everyone's like, oh, maybe Vince wants to give him his big moment in his home. And we look at each other and go, that you can't. This is why people don't understand. I am a much more objective fan than you think I am. I'm like, no, he's got to beat him here. We can't do a hobbledy-gobbledy ending and then wait till Edmonton's just so Benoit can get a hometown win. Vince hates that shit. The parties always lose in North Carolina. He doesn't do that. You got to take advantage of the moment. And when he was doing the whole thing and you're like, oh, no. But then Benoit snapped it over and did the crossface. The place went crazy. And we're literally screaming. Even me. Hunter, just tap. Just tap. End it. And he was in the middle and he's doing the thing and he finally does it. Place went crazy. And we pretty much spent the whole ride back on the train, Metro North, going back to Stamford. And everybody in the train just doing we're all just humming Benoit's theme all the way home. It was an amazing moment. I got to be honest. It was an amazing moment. And I know, like you said, there are some great live moments in the history of this business. You were at one of them when Mick won. I mean, those kind of moments you can never duplicate. There were moments in Dallas 2 years ago that will never, to me, be duplicated. That might be still one of the greatest live shows I've ever been at.
And then let's close with a homer here, and that's 28, Hell in the Cell. I'm low. Meltzer, 4 3/4. Canton, 5 stars. And I'm low at 4.5. I watched this one last night. I'd probably be closer to 4 3/4. On the high end, maybe even 5 if I really had to sink my teeth into it. Shawn bothers me in this match. But despite that, unbelievable spot with the super kick into a pedigree. And then the 1, 2, 3 and the kick out at 2.999 on the Undertaker there in the Hell in a Cell. This is epic. It's overhated. It's underloved. If you love it, I'm kind of on your side now. It's just beautiful. It's a great match. I understand the negatives, but you can't be you can't ding it that much. So I think I'm unfair here at 4.5 dinging it. Scott, overall, is this your favorite Triple H WrestleMania match?
Yes. Yeah, it is. I always loved 16 just because he won. It was cool to see the heel win. I won a lot of money that night. But just top to bottom, that package, the memory remains. It was like the last vestige of the old guard. Even though Taker would wrestle for, 6 more years or whatever, and 2 years later the streak would end, and that's another debate for another day. To me, Shawn, Hunter, and Taker standing there was like, all right, it's time for us to officially hand this flamethrower over to this generation. We're good. And honestly, from that point forward, Hunter either rarely won a match because of the feud, or he would put over who he needed to put over. No one cared if he lost or beat Batista. No one cares if he lost or beat Brock. But anybody he needed to put over, John Cena, Benoit, Batista,
Booker T. Sorry.
Oh, no, sorry. He went through a stretch where he put over Jericho, all these guys he put over. Everyone says he doesn't. He always puts guys over. Always. Maybe the aesthetic of the match may not be pleasing to everybody, but in the end, when he needed to put somebody over, he put somebody over. The reason Booker T did not beat him at 19 was because of Goldberg coming in. Yeah, simple as that. That's it. If Goldberg wasn't coming in, Booker wins that match. And I'll take that to the grave.
So, Scott, let me just read some WrestleMania extras to you, and then we'll kind of fully digest Triple H's resume and see if he's too high or too low. Some extras are a little wonky, but overall pretty good. WrestleMania 12 with Mark Mero and Sable. Sable actually brought him to the ring, and then they had their falling out, and then he started his Mark Mero feud. WrestleMania 15, the DX betrayal. Yep. We talked about that earlier, where he kind of had that show-long weave, and he turns on X-Pac in the Shane McMahon match. WrestleMania 31 with Stephanie. The promo announcing the attendance. Here comes The Rock. Here comes Ronda. It was the setup of WrestleMania 32 match, perhaps, but we got that maybe a few years afterwards with Kurt involved. This is close to your heart. I was there also, and it was a great moment. He retired his boots in the ring to open day 2 of WrestleMania. So out of those 4 things, which WrestleMania extra would kind of stick out to you the most?
Well, for me, it would be 38 because I was there. And my favorite PTB moment of all time, and you of all people will totally love this moment. So we're sitting there. We're at the section at AT&T, and we're all expecting the first match. I was thinking the first match was, I didn't think it was going to be McAfee in theory because I knew Vince was involved. I was thinking maybe Edge and AJ or something. Triple H's music hit. I'm losing my fucking mind so his music hits. I get up because it's my guy. Then Grooney, who's 2 seats away from me, he gets up. He elbows me in the ribs. Sean Kidd gets up and goes, "Sit down. This isn't your moment." And he told Grooney to sit down. It's his moment, not yours. It's the greatest thing ever. Grooney got schooled. I love that kid. What a knucklehead. But listen, man, when he put his boots down, I think we knew for the most part he was probably not going to wrestle anymore anyway. There's really nothing left for him to do. But, we heard about the heart condition and everything. And when he dropped the boots, yeah, when you're there, you're there. And I mean, there were enough moments that weekend, Steve's first match in fucking 20 years, Cody, and I mean, just Taker. I mean, it was just, but then to see that, I thought he was just going to go out, say welcome and da-da-da-da, but to drop the boots.
It was done just right. Great transition out of the ring, and it was selfless. It was very, very, very good. All right, as we kind of got Triple H at WrestleMania. Is 11 too high, too low, or just right? What do you think?
I think it's just right. I think he could be maybe 10, maybe 9. I wouldn't put him higher than 9, but I think 11's fine. I wouldn't put him that much lower. I think that would be a disservice. I'll be honest with you. I think he's anywhere between 9 and 11. I'm not that much of a mark that I would put him at like 4 or 5. That's ridiculous. But I'm not that stupid. I love other guys. I love other wrestlers, so it's, I have many t-shirts of a lot of the guys you probably will have in the top 10. So I think that's a perfect spot for him. He's had some amazing matches. I know in his mind that he tried to sculpt the perfect match like his idol Flair. And I'm on my chrono watches. I'm about to start the reign of terror, as everybody says, 02 into 03, all of 03 into early 04. He wanted to sculpt like those Starrcade 85 and Flair and Dusty going 35 minutes. And he wanted in his mind, I want like the match like my idol. And more often than not, he pushed it almost too far. The opponents a lot of times didn't jive. The storyline didn't jive. Like, he always in his head wanted that perfect match like Flair had, his idol. And a lot of times, sometimes it worked, other times it didn't. And particularly at WrestleMania, I mean, we could talk about like all spectrums of him, but at least here, John Cena as a challenger, he did the right thing. Batista in 05 and Benoit in 04. Again, he would have put Booker over if Goldberg wasn't coming in because they wanted to keep Triple H's reign strong so Goldberg could job, so he could job to him. That's a whole other controversy, another conversation. But Triple H always tried to mold the perfect match. He's a lot like Brett in that aspect. He's not like his best friend. Shawn Michaels didn't have to sculpt anything. He just showed up, put on 20 minutes of near perfection, and left the ring. Triple H was a lot like Brett. I think he kind of like needed the A, B, C, D, E. Sometimes it worked. A lot of times it didn't. But I think you can never question his passion for the business and wanting to just make the WrestleMania moment the one to remember, whether it's him or he's giving it to somebody else, like a Benoit, Batista, Cena. Those 3 straight years, 04, 05, 06, he put over 3 guys that would be the future of the, well, 2 of the 3 anyway, was the next chapter of the company. Let's do that. 21 and 22, those 2 matches, he selflessly went there and he put over 2 guys that were the backbone for the next, 6 or 7 years, 8 years, even longer. So he knew it was right for the business. Sometimes getting between A and B was problematic. But from where you have him on your list, I maybe would put him at 10, maybe 9, but I wouldn't put him higher than 9. But he certainly wouldn't be lower than 11. I think in terms of down, I don't think he should be any lower than 11. I think that's a good spot for him.
By the theme of how we did this episode, sounds like he's in the ballpark, Scott.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. You hit it on the head, my friend.
We all know where to find you, buddy. Thank you as always. We'll see you in the next one, bud.
You got it, brother.